Well, today's talk is on Sydney Future Infrastructure Challenge, investigating world's best practice to create sustainable geotechnical database for New South Wales. Based on all the work we're doing, we need to have an approach for the future. Okay. Today I'll the talk will be broken up into three parts. The part that's already been done, so the tunnelling's been done on Sydney Southwest, where I'll talk about Sydney Harbour and Central. And also I'll touch on about Sydney Metro West, which has just gone out for expression of interest, and I'll highlight some of the things that we've discovered along the way during that investigation and compiling everything together. And Churchill Fellowship, last year I was awarded Churchill Fellow to go and assess across different geological surveys internationally. That's been put on hold due to COVID-19. And so that's to go out and research how other geological surveys compile all their data and then use it later for the benefit of for society. All right, Sydney Metro, City and Southwest. This was started in 2014. We undertook geophysics. We're able to, based on the geophysics, we're able to plan our investigations across the harbour. So this entailed, the set out here on the harbour, HQ coring, sonic coring, in situ stress testing, water pressure testing, and a series of geophysics. On land, 197 boreholes were done, including a whole lot of testing that went right through that whole process. And you can see the constraints we had out on the harbour, setting up barges on the harbour, and also drilling at Central, platform 15 there, close to live rail systems. Okay, next one. These are just highlights of what I've captured. Some of the processes that we undertook earlier on in the piece. We undertook marine mag. That's that sort of coloured show across here from Sydney Harbour, just to assess whether we had any still items in the harbour, or whether if we could pick up these dikes that were published in 1983 Geological map. So no, it was really, we didn't pick up anything that sort of, but yeah, the Luna Park fault zone does highlight a bit with the mag across the harbour, and that could be just something else, I don't know. The other survey is just a typical reflection survey that was done across the harbour. Okay. All right, so based on all the work that was done out there, bathymetrics, detailed seismic reflection. We also did cross-hole tomography to chase the deepening of the harbour, and from that we actually uncovered what appears to be a major geological structure, a low angle thrust fault, and I can talk about that maybe a bit later. And then later additional refraction surveys across the harbour, and and some resistivity surveys that we undertook as well. Based on the compiling the geophysics, we're able to, with the boreholes, further constrain our knowledge of the top of rock surface. So you can see the projected surface below the sediments. So with the surface, the green highlights, silty clays, the yellows sort of highlight sands, and the blues other silty clays, and then into more fluvial and colluvial material, which are the red zones to the north. And again, looking to the south, you can see the two tunnels running through, and yeah, the profile through the harbour there. So yeah, building up these 3D models. This is what I'll put together for an understanding of later. So sections through the harbour, just a profile highlighting the section of those layers that were modelled in 3D, and you can highlight those areas there between the Unit 1 that we classified, Unit 2s are the sands, silty clays are the green, sort of sandy clay type material, and then you get this sort of colluvial material with big boulders that had fallen down. And you can see the red line that runs across with the green box that defines where the tunnel boring machine went across Sydney Harbour. So two times. Part of the work we did was to assess geological structure on land, because the type of TBM at that time we hadn't decided, and potentially we needed to understand what the structure was in the rock as well. So we sort of went regional and assessed the structures around the McMahon's Point Peninsula, and we're able to map in the dikes based on some evidence from retaining walls and joint sets that appear next to them. So you can see the detailed sort of collection of data across that area as well. So you can have a look at the overlying air photos. So this is the structure map that we define. But if you overlay the old 1983 geological map, you can see where the dikes were initially. Based on mapping, we believe that they are, and targeting investigation with boreholes, we did identify the dike down here, but the one up here was just too constrained to get in there to do any drilling. So it was put there as a knowledge that the tunnellers had to be aware of. So the crossing was done by tunnel boring machine. This was named Kathleen. It's a specialist tunnel boring machine, slurry mixed mode. So it sort of can tunnel through rock and also sediment. Once it's under full face pressure, and where we were probably under about 4 bar of pressure there. So it's sort of an interesting concept of tunnelling. So the completed tunnels, so this is at Blues Point, the extraction point. So this was the completed 2 tunnels across Sydney Harbour. And you can see as you run back through the rock there, they're all segmentally lined with fully encased concrete constructed as the tunnel boring machine progresses forward. So what we also did, we did some legacy work on the harbour as well. We did some carbon dates on the radio, and so we were able to do about 9, and so we were able to do some profiling of the sediments. Some of them down below are greater than 50,000 years, but some of them up around here, 38,000 years. And then the sands come in at about 22,000 years. You can see the units across here on the left. And we've actually defined the Holocene, which came in at less than 10,000 year old. So we've got 2 dates in this section over here, and several dates. And a lot of these had a whole lot of shells across the harbour. But as soon as you got into this material down below, there was no evidence of any shells, which sort of indicated possibly a fluvial type environment. So just a river line that was sort of progressed before sea levels rose. All right, the next one that was of interest was Central. A lot of you probably catch trains through Central and wonder what's going on, but the earlier work we did there was quite significant, trying to pull together, understand the cemeteries that we had there, old buildings, gas works, and plan all our investigations around this. So a lot of people that used to go to UTS would have walked down Devonshire Street here, and back in the old days, that was where the cemetery was, on the northern side. And you can see with the progression, you sort of went from 1900s, they cleared the cemetery, and then and built the grand terminal here, the country line. And then in 1924, the suburban lines were put in. But in the later on, this is another excavation for the Eastern Suburbs rail that was cut in Chalmers Street. So a bit complex, the history around that area. So with all the information we collected, boreholes and that from Sydney Trains and all that, we're able to, I was able to build up this 3D model across that area. And you can see the different layers from Asheville shale down to Hawkesbury sandstone. These are all Triassic sediments or sedimentary rocks. And the yellow up here are the aeolian wind-blown sands that have come across from Botany and blown across. And hence why there was a cemetery here, because they buried everybody in the sands. But the name from historical names was actually called Sandy Hills, this central area, before it was cleared, and the old stations put in. Now we have this metro station that's being constructed here, and you can see the dike. The dike is an outer and the southern margin and the northern margin, but it's up to 6 meters wide. That progresses. It was actually 1952. It was assessed by the Geological Survey at the Dental Hospital, and so that information that we get off the government website digs was used to build this model up across Sydney. And you can see the inclined boreholes that were put across to target these dikes, but also the dike that runs along Eddy Avenue. That was picked up in tunnel mapping from the Eastern Suburbs rail line. And so using that information there, we're able to target this borehole across here and intersect the dike in that location. So it sort of gives us some precision. And this is a typical section through Central Station. You can see the dikes, these big tabular discordant bodies, and the upper aeolian sands, and then residual capping, and the sort of Mittagong formation here sits just above. And as you progress to the east, you get into the Asheville shale. And what's interesting about this location and that structure we found on Sydney Harbour is, if you're up in North Sydney and you've got Asheville shale, it sits at an RL of about 80 metres, and down here you're at an RL of about 20 metres. So there's a difference in elevation of 50, 60 metres, and and these it sort of indicates that there's been some sort of some geological processes that have elevated the rock to the north from the south. So if you wonder the big cranes and platforms sitting at Central, this is what's happening below, big excavations that are happening. I went down to inspect because I assessed the big dike that's down there. And this is some of the core that we intersected here. The dike's pretty well highly weathered, which sort of compares to the rock here. And I suspect as you go further down, it'll get a better material. And in that outcrop, it's up to 6 meters wide with sort of planar and irregular boundaries on it. So it's an interesting view when I went down. And it's sort of been termed the Ultimo Dock, which is pretty continuous. You'll see on the next photos from Metro West. So Metro West, this is the new project that's being put out to tender now. In this one here was much of a data sharing approach. So you can see the boreholes that we have across Sydney. A lot of these or 80% of them are all linked to boreholes and reports. So you can actually access location. So the government department can access this information and use it internally for their own use now. So across the alignment from west to east, we used 130 historical boreholes. They range from 1800s. But the big key ones were all the old earlier projects, CBD Metro, substantial amount of work that were done in those earlier projects 10 years ago. These projects come to a halt, but we're able to capture this data and hold on to it. So across the Sydney region, we have access to 13,000 boreholes, which are all attributed, and they have reliability, they have ownership, and all that sort of thing. So, future use of this can be, there's a whole lot of history in that database. So with the GINT database, we're able to incorporate 480 of these boreholes into the GINT associated with the new boreholes we've done. So with paleo, so across this, part of the work was to identify paleo valleys with a pretty significant faults, dikes, brick pits, and industrial areas, especially when we head west, and brick pits especially. So I can show you an example next. Oops. Here's a classic example out at St. Peter's. We've got a tunnel that was placed below Sydney Park Road. And you can see the brick pits on either side of it there. So we've highlighted this, and the contractors came in for detailed design, picked up a tunnel that went from one brick pit to another, and so a whole lot of further investigations were done to assess whether this was impacted on the tunnels below. But it was sort of found from one intersecting borehole here that that was the void space for that sort of conveyor shaft there, which, it was just a faint line on a map that was picked up from a library search. So the investigations, we did 92 boreholes across Sydney. That was incorporated with in situ stress tests, water pressuring down. Everyone was downhole image, so we can measure the geological structure in this, and potentially in 3D modelling you can develop structures. 69 piezometers were put across the alignment to measure groundwater and temperatures in the ground, and then 27 shallow boreholes to measure contamination and any purged groundwater. And 32 CPTs were done in soft ground areas. So some of the bay areas and river flat areas, we've used 32, and we've got more planned for the future once the tenderers start assessing where they want to do more work. And across these areas, because there's a lot of industry, we've done a lot of environmental boreholes and monitoring wells to assess that. So over the harbour, we did many bays. We did 13 boreholes across these harbours. These included the same testing that we did on, and a lot of sedimological analysis. And on this one here, we did some more carbon age dating on sediments from Darling Harbour right through to Parramatta. So we've sort of got an idea of age of sediments across these areas. And started off, we did a series of geophysics surveys across these regions here to give us an idea of where rock level is, so we could actually plan our investigations. If we don't know where the investigations is, well, we can't get these sort of projects priced up. So part of the desktop study, I did a sort of a borehole reliability map. It's sort of just contouring the reliance of the data. So basically all the little blue dots are all the historical information there, and just sort of contour up what we have. So scale One would be information that have coordinates, RLs, borehole photos, good logs, and then it progressively gets to fall when you don't have good information. But doing this, we're able to plan where we were going to do boreholes based on some of the areas. The alignment changed from our early days, but you'll see the change in colour on the next slide. So once we did the boreholes, there was a significant shift that sort of gave us a bit more confidence in areas that we achieved what we had to achieve with the investigation. So with the bays area, across this area, you can see the boreholes through here. There was about 300 boreholes collected. So we're able to model the top of Hawkesbury sandstone through this area, and also define these dikes, the Great Sydney Dyke, which is a pretty significant dike that runs all the way back to the coast, and the Ultimo Dock over here, which is the one that I highlighted in its central. We've also been able to model the alluvial material in the harbour as well. And you can see once you put the LiDAR on there, you can see where the bays are, and there's sort of the elevated rock structure here that highlights the old Glebe Island. And this is where the Anzac Bridge sort of runs across here. So if we see the Great Sydney Dyke running through here, this is what it looks like in our crop just to the north of Anzac Bridge approach, 6 metre wide, and pretty significant dike that sort of cuts across Sydney. At the moment now it's full of trees, so this picture taken 20 years ago, I think. It's sort of, and what I've done is approach the government agencies to actually preserve this and not destroy this outcrop, because it has significant historical for geology as a whole. All right, with Metro West, during Metro West we noted, because we intersected Hawkesbury sandstone all the way down in our investigations, we're able to understand, I don't know what this thing up here, sorry, there's something that's cropped across my picture, sorry. Based on Northwest Metro, where we've had Asheville shale, and Metro West and City and Southwest, we're able to pull out boreholes that intersected Asheville shale or good quality. And based on this 108 boreholes, we're able to define this tuff flap lamination that is right across the Sydney area at a level of 3 metres above the top of Mittagong Formation. So if you have a look here, just a description: Hawkesbury sandstone, cross-bedded, medium to coarse grain quartzose sandstone, and then into the Mittagong Formation, which is sort of variable from interbedded sandstones to more siltstone interbedded, with sandstone interbeds, as we call lamanites. The base of the Asheville shale is defined by the Rouse Hill member, and that's this section here. It's about 6 metres in depth, and about 1 metre down and 3 metres above, you've got the tuff layer here. So immediately above the Asheville shale, you've got the Kellyville lamanites, which is the interbedded siltstones and sandstones. So with the boreholes across Sydney, Northwest Rail, the geologists during that project there actually used this to define their any offsets for faults. And so we progressed this work, and with City and Southwest, you can see out of Campsie, the borehole, no, Campsie is the one down here, but City Metro West, this is out at Parramatta, out Sydney Olympic Park, I think. You can see the tuff layer in the core here, and these all sit exactly the same distance as these. So it's about 2.97 metres plus or minus 400 mil. And this is right across Sydney. But what was interesting, we did some work down on the Southern Highlands, and we picked up the Asheville shale in that rock there. And again, the tuff layer was sitting, or the tuff lamination was sitting at that level above Hawkesbury sandstone as well. So one of the samples that we got from Westmead, we actually sent across to the US and got some the extracted zircons, and we've come back with a date of 242 million years, which is pretty significant for understanding where these sit in the Triassic sequence. And again, so these are the boreholes where I've collected those samples, and so those horizons there, Hawkesbury at the bottom, Mittagong, and you can see the variability in thickness of the Mittagong. So it's really not a good marker system if you don't, if Hawkesbury sandstone's there, because it does get variably thick across the region. But the tuff lamination, if you do pick it up, it does make a good little correlation tool across the, and you can see the sort of structure that, so we're running east-west here to Rose Hill, and that's sort of parallel to the general axis. And then as we head north, we're in a limb of a, the geology's rising to the north, so it's a limb part of the syncline, that the Fairfield syncline that's running through that area, and then it flattens out again as we go east-west again. So this is the only thing, but we are picking up some significant structural movements across from Concord through to Rose Hill. And so this is an example. We're at Sydney Olympic Park here, Haslam's Creek crossing. And some of the boreholes that we did here, we defined, based on that tuff layer and the Hawkesbury sandstone. The tuff layer sort of gave us an indication that we had a depressed zone in here, and this is significant right across from Concord through to this area. So what I believe is happening is we've got some form of Horst and Graben system that's formed the lowlands, and you can see the 3D diagram here where you've got the elevated zone. These are where we built our Olympic stadiums, and to the east or to the west we've got Silverwater, where it's another elevated zone, and as you go to Duck Creek it sort of drops off again. And what I see happening across these areas is if you go to the north, you can't pick up these. Sometimes you'll just see some discrete geological structures to the north, but then you come into these bays here and it opens up. It's a zone of depression. So I believe we've got some significant structure happening in this area, and possibly related to some sort of release bend or something like that. So it's interesting. And then looking to the north here, you can see elevated areas here, and all the lowlands here, and you're isolated by these highlands and across at roads as well. So, and we have mapped the Homebush Bay Fault Zone does run through this whole area here, and it's picked up in a lot of boreholes as crush zones. And then we picked up a big crush zone in one of the boreholes that Sydney Uni and Utrecht are collaborating with me on to assess, understand these structures in more detail. All right, Churchill Fellowship. I should have been over there now, but oh well, that's life. So what we're trying to do is secure all the geology and geotechnical data to make a sustainable information data set for the future. And you can see everything that we've done in the past, and if we lose that, it becomes an issue in the future. A lot of more money that's spent on that. So at the present data sets that we've got for New South Wales, we've got DIGS, which is Public Online Information System, MinView, which is an excellent mapping system, with boreholes, geology, and now it's also brought in the geotech information from Public Works. And then also the core library, the Geological, the Transport for New South Wales have been using the core library as a repository for all their core. And this allows the contractors a better place to go and assess the core to tender with. Other portals that we have are just Office EPA, Spatial Services, and Water New South Wales. Geoscience Australia has a data thing, and Transport for New South Wales across using a 2D project data set that captures geological, geotech, and utilities. So everything that brings together from the project is captured within that data set. And so this should be put into like some sort of grand dive before you dig, and hence why I want to go to overseas to look at these things. So the Create database is just my GIS system. When it comes to geology, is just transposed onto this. So you can see the geostructures through here, dikes, faults, and boreholes overlaid with the statewide seamless geology. And you've got alignments, you've got designs, you've got everything in this one database here. The other database that's been so useful on these projects is DIGS. And a classic example was trying to understand where these dikes are progressing across on the northern side of Sydney, and what came in one of these reports here from DIGS from 1943. And you can see HMAS, I think it's Waterhen, big excavation that runs here. But in this report here, it showed this big photograph of the rock face. So this was in the 1943 air photo. Because we were trying to chase the dikes across this area, well, there's no evidence of dikes in there, so that sort of limited where we had to look. So it's there's a lot of information that's captured in these sets, and people should use it. MinView, another good set. I use it all the time, especially when for boreholes, trying to understand, regional stratigraphy, and that it's pretty useful. And now with the Public Works data set on there under Geotech reports, you've got access to geotech information or just information general across an area. So it's quite a good resource. So my assessment was supposed to be, part of it is to talk with industry, public sectors, to identify any benefits with collaboration to bring all this data set together. When I was with the Geo Survey, I initially carried out an audit on a lot of the government departments, but this need to be followed up again. So as part of my Churchill, I'll undertake this. And also consultation with industry, which is undergoing at the moment. So there's the Geotechnical Society of Australia are being brought into this as well. And part of my study was to assess even Queensland Geotechnical Database, journey to England to visit the British Geological Survey, Netherlands to visit their Geological Survey, and the Geological Survey of Japan and their 3D modelling, and also visit Swiss Topo. And the Swiss Geotech Society wanted, basically we were interested to get together and talk because they're keen on doing something what we want to do here too. So I'm just summarising what's happening over in these countries. British Geological Survey undergoing Project Iceberg, and this is a data framework that captures a lot of information. Where we have 2D here, they're capturing it in a 3D sense, so tunnels, utilities, geotech, boreholes, everything's being captured. So it's quite an interesting concept and progress that's happening. But now what they're doing, you can see across the UK, they've access to a lot of boreholes, but the boreholes are standardised using an attributed table, which we use as an AGS industry standard that we work here with when we do geotech. But if you keep everything consistent, then the work is can progress and become standard. But now what they're doing is exploiting these data sets. So British Geological Survey developing groundhog desktop application, and this information here, you can actually build geological models from the data sets that they've got on the system. And you can see here the exploitation of the data set, adding information in, and profiling it and capturing it in a 3D. So at the moment they're developing this, so it's quite an exciting concept that they're happening. So the Netherlands Geological Survey of the Netherlands, or termed TNO, have developed a system called BRO. So it's a key register that captures subsurface information, and basically it's they've implemented law that public has to subscribe to this database and register anything they do when they break the ground. So it's sort of quite important to understand that you're capturing information and understand where people are putting boreholes, because they can have impact in a city environment on tunnels or anything, especially in tunnel environment. If you've got voids above, they can put people's lives at risk. So it's quite yeah. And then they've also got surface viewer from their 2D platform, so they can generate profiles and 3D images from that. So it's exciting stuff they've got. The Geological Survey of Japan, most of it's in Japanese, so it's hard to understand. That's why I'd like to go. I really wanted to go there and assess what they were doing. But again, they've got a menu type system where you can click on and open up boreholes. But also they've got provision for 3D maps and sections, so you can generate sections across these geological areas. So. And Swiss Topo is another one that are combining their geological resource together and developing 3D models. They have a lot of areas of high quaternary sediments, but also areas of high elevation where they put hydro projects and big tunnels through these areas. So it's a significant significant setup that they have over there. But it'd be what I want to understand is how they integrate, how they bring industry in and combine that with government to get this seamless sort of working environment. So then up in Queensland, this was probably the first geotech database that started happening. So it sort of captures a whole lot of reports. We're in Sydney, where I'm trying to break it down from reports into boreholes. So the data is a lot more, and you get to understand what's in that information rather than just reliant on a report. But it's progressive, and it's sort of, the registry was based on the New Zealand geotech database that came after the Christchurch event. And the reason why we need to capture this data is, if you look at this sort of infrastructure pipeline and the forecasting ahead, 2024 is really a peak, and we need to be really, in New South Wales, we really need to be capturing this information because in the future, where you've got a peak, if you lose that information, you end up spending a lot more time and money trying to fix it up in the future. So. I think we need to be actively sort of getting on top of things before we sort of peak. and potentially with high-speed rail plan for the future, yeah, these peaks may even extend out further. So we don't know. So just the direction, part of the work that I want to go and have a look over there, but I want to sort of come back and be able to lobby government to go down the road of combining this sort of data set. This is happening with the Geological Survey of New South Wales and their coordinating committee of government geologists, with some MUAs being signed to allow open data transfer between the agencies. This has been like, Metro West is a classic where, you know, the data that was collected, the investigation on that, for that project there, you know, we saved at least about $20–30 million worth of investigation just to have that data available. So you're still spending money on investigations because you have to, because you need to know groundwater regimes, you need to know the aggressivity of an area, you need to know the abrasivity of an area. So you need to collect this information. Standardised ground investigations across government departments and industry. This is being implemented by Sydney Metro and several external parties, and are formalising specification guidelines to standardise the way we carry out investigations. There's also a working party that's formalising the AGS format to bring it in line with other countries using AGS4. So what I'd like to see, all these 3D models that we produce, and hence why I've sort of shown them, is to allow us to capture this data, you know, because, you know, if I go away from these projects, or who holds the data, consultant or government agency, but if that government agency gets closed down, well, we lose a lot of information. And I think a lot of this data needs to go into a central repository. And yeah, companies like Bentley have been doing work on open ground data using cloud-based capture, and this goes to a central sort of data set. And I think that's the way we need to look, is trying, rather than putting everything on hard drives and that and losing it. I think it needs to go into the cloud and be available for everybody to use. So the database in the future could capture ground investigations across the whole of New South Wales and potentially Australia. But I think the way we have to approach this is, I think there needs to be changes in the law. When we put a hole in the ground, it needs to be registered, because the issue is we don't know whether people drill a hole and leave a casing down there or a bit, or and if you're doing any tunnelling in an area, this could put lives at jeopardy. Also, if we can sort of maintain a consistent coordinate elevation and measure depth, and also well completion, that's important, especially on the deeper boreholes. I think that's, also things like piling, tension anchors for buildings. We should really understand where that's defining around an area. So at least, when future projects go through, they can just assess this data and go from there. And I think, as Churchill says, let's advance worrying, become advanced thinking and planning. So I thought I'd just finish that off.